As the Rugby World Cup is getting closer and closer, coaches are now deciding to name their 33-man lineups for the tournament. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the teams and reacting to the teams that England, South Africa and the All Blacks have announced, and basically just reviewing the selection choices. Firstly, I'm going to start off with England. Now, I made a prediction video for the England the England squad for the Rugby World Cup, and it is relatively different to the one that I selected. I selected based upon form and probably less so experience, which Steve Borthwick has ultimately favoured. Start off with the props. Ellis Genge is the obvious choice, with Joe Marler and Bevan Rodd as the second replacement loose head props. Joe Marler with the 79 caps next to his name, a very experienced choice. I believe he doesn't offer too much outside of scrummaging, but once again, scrummaging is a prop's primary role, so he gets the nod there. Bevan Rodd, with only 3 caps to his name, is a potentially surprise inclusion when you've got the likes of Mako Vunipola and Rapalva Ruskin, who's also in form. Bevan Rodd, once again, solid scrummager, so that's probably what Steve Borthwick has favoured there. Pretty standard with the Sinclair and Will Stewart, and then Dan Cole. Steve Borthwick, being ex-Leicester Tigers head coach, probably did lean towards his old foe at Leicester with 100 caps. Dan Cole offers very limited ability around the park, but in terms of scrummaging, he can hold his own. Moving on to the hookers, we have the experienced Jamie George sat there with 77 caps, and then we have the extremely inexperienced Theo Dan and Jack Walker with 3 caps. Now, if you combine these two players, Theo Dan and Jack Walker, together, you probably would have about 30 minutes of international game time. So I'd almost go as far as saying England's Rugby World Cup hopes are pinned on Jamie George staying fit for the tournament. So I'd guess they'd be very conservative with Jamie George early on in the tournament and in these warm-up games, and trying to get through the warm-up matches and the early pool matches with the likes of your Theo Dans. But yeah, definitely a weak point, especially considering Theo Dan's line-out darts really struggled when he came on against Wales, and Jamie Blomere, who's not included, also really struggled in that Welsh game, which maybe tipped the coin in Jack Walker's favour. Moving on to the second rows, Ollie Chessum, Maro Itoje as expected. Courtney Laws I've put down as a second row, but once again he can move into the back row. George Martin is once again probably an inclusion based upon Steve Borthwick being a Leicester Tigers head coach. He's only got his 2 caps to his name and is very, very fresh and new in that England mould. He struggled against Wales, knocking on a couple balls, and does he deserve his spot? Potentially, potentially not. Maybe you'd favour someone who's been there and done it before, but he's in there nevertheless. Dave Ribbons, the ex-Northampton player who's now moving to Toulon, I believe, gets the nod. I agree with this inclusion because I believe Ribbons does offer something a little bit extra around the park with his offloading ability and his ability to nick a line out. Moving into the back row, Lewis Ludlam for sure should be included. Jack Willis there. The surprise inclusion of Billy Vunipola sat there with 68 caps, one of the most experienced, or the most experienced back rower in the England team. Billy Vunipola, I believe by the start of the World Cup, wouldn't have played rugby in about 2, maybe even 3 months since he came off injured against La Rochelle in the Champions Cup. Ben Earl is also in there. One of the form players in the Premiership, does get his opportunity at the international level, but he hasn't really proved himself. And Tom Curry, back in the England mould, very important player for England in that back row. Now, Billy Vunipola is the only specialist number 8 we have, so Steve Borthwick's counting upon the likes of Tom Curry and Ludlam, potentially, maybe even Earl, to move into that number 8 jersey if necessary. Scrum halves, Steve Borthwick has gone with 3 scrum halves, Danny Kerr and Ben Youngs, with almost 200 caps between them. Incredibly, well no, I think it is over 200 caps between them. Incredibly experienced players. I'm not sure which he's going to favour to start. Danny Kerr didn't really set alight the field when playing against Wales on the weekend. Ben Youngs probably is the preferred choice, and Jack Van Poortvliet coming in there as well. The player in which is probably going to try and learn off the likes of Kerr and Youngs, but is a very good player in his own right. Scrum half journey for me is probably the weakest jersey position in the English team, with Danny Kerr and Ben Youngs probably being a little bit past it, Jack Van Poortvliet potentially being too inexperienced, And yeah, Ben Youngs and Jack Van Poortvliet as well play very similar mould. So personally, I wouldn't have these two players on the same matchday squad. Throw in Danny Care, offer something different. Moving on to the 3 fly halves. Now, in the prop region and the fly half and scrum half region, Steve Borthwick has gone with 3 players, which is an awful lot and leaves not very many selection opportunities for the centres. Centres is definitely the position that has been compromised for England. Marcus Smith, 22 caps, is definitely, well, has been included in the World Cup squad with the experienced George Ford and Owen Farrell with 82 caps and 106 caps respectively. I do believe Farrell is the number 1 choice, with Smith coming in at number 2 and George Ford in the number 3 jersey. I'm not too sure what a player like George Ford offers that Farrell doesn't. I believe in the warm-up matches, Smith will probably play some of the games which England will be favoured to win, and then Farrell coming in for the sort of test match field games. I'm not really sure where George Ford comes into the mould, but he's there anyway. Centres, Ollie Lawrence, who's in a rich vein of form, Manu Tuolangi in 51 caps, and Marchant and Daly following them. Daly, I believe, probably has been put down as a centre, although he can play in the back 3. Marchant can also play in the back 3, so there's definitely that ability to move around positions, also with Farrell coming into the centres. In the back 3, we have Anthony Watson, Max Malins, Henry Arundel, Freddie Stewart. No room for Joe Thocken-Singer after what was a poor performance from him on the weekend, which is unfortunate because personally I believe he offers more than the likes of Malins and Arundel, because despite what he showed on the weekend, he's actually reasonably good in the air and is very physical, offers something different. A player which I think is just unbelievable to leave out is Caden Murley. Caden Murley, I believe, is significantly better than Max Malins, and not significantly, but definitely has the edge on Arundel, especially what he's been doing for Harlequins in the Premiership. So yeah, Arundel potentially fortunate to be included, although he's an incredible player and can light up the pitch in a matter of seconds. So yeah, that's the England 33-man Rugby World Cup squad for France, and I'm going to move on to the All Blacks. Now on to the All Blacks, one of the most famous Rugby World Cup teams in history, looking to add another Rugby World Cup to their collection since their last one in 2015. All Blacks have come into a very good vein of form of late, with the Rugby Championship win and some brilliant performances throughout against the likes of Wallabies, South Africa, and the first half especially against Argentina. Now, looking through the All Blacks team, there's a couple of players once again that I'm a little bit unsure of, but I've watched a lot of the Super Rugby the previous season, so I've got a vague idea of the form of some of these players. Now, looking at the props, De Groot, Laulala, Lomax, Newell, Tuangafasi and Williams. Now, the props have been one of the major areas of improvements from New Zealand. Usually, if they're playing South Africa, you'd say New Zealand can exploit them in the back line, but up front, you'd give the edge to South Africa. Now, maybe that is still the case, but there's been leaps and bounds of improvement made from the All Blacks in that department, and can now really match the big teams physically and even dominate them in parts. You can also say the same about their rolling maul. The All Blacks have definitely shored up their maul defence and their maul attack. So yeah, the props have been a massive part of doing that, with De Groot really impressing me, as well as Lomax as well. Going into the hookers, we have Dan Coles, one of the most experienced players in this team, with the informed Cody Taylor and Samson Takiaho also. You'd probably favour Cody Taylor to start, with Samson Takiaho coming off the bench. Takiaho, his main area of weakness compared to Taylor is his line-out darts. All of these 3 players can really offer something in attack and explosive runners. Probably Takiaho the most explosive runner, but you'd definitely say Cody Taylor would edge him, especially in the line-out darts. Moving into the second rows, Scott Barrett, amazing performances of late, especially his tackle against Tate McDermott in the Aussies' last test match. Make sure you go see that if you haven't already. Incredible tackle. With Retallick, Vahi and Whitelock. Whitelock once again played amazing last weekend, brilliant jackling over the ball. So I'd probably start Scott Barrett and Whitelock, and Retallick has got a little bit of an injury problem at the moment. So yeah, that's a little bit of worry for the All Blacks. Moving into the back row, Sam Cane often got questions asked about whether he was playing just because he's captain or because he deserved his spot. But his form has really improved of late. Shannon Frizzell on the loose sorry, not the loose head. The loose head's hide of the scrum, the blind side flanker. Has been playing some brilliant rugby, and his carrying and try scoring ability close to the line is second to none. Jacobson as well included in there with some brilliant ball carries for his club team, and Dalton Papali'i, the Blues captain, getting in there as well with the infamous Ardie Savea at number 8. No doubts about that, and no doubts about Ardie Savea getting in that team. It was almost written on paper before the team was announced. 3 scrum halves: Andy Christie, Cameron Roydegaard and Aaron Smith. One of the best scrum halves of all time in there with Aaron Smith, really putting his name under the lights one more time for the final roll of the dice in this Rugby World Cup, trying to get another. Cameron Roydegaard of the Crusaders getting in there as well. Not had very many caps, and it was almost certain that Smith and Christie were going to go. A little bit of question mark over Roydegaard, but maybe he impressed just enough in his last test match to get the shout. Moving into the first fives, I think, as the All Blacks call them, but as I'd call them, the fly halves: Beauden Barrett, McKenzie and Mo'unga. Beauden Barrett maybe classed as a 15, potentially also, with McKenzie being able to move to fullback as well. Mo'unga being the sort of in-form fly half. You saw the difference it made against Australia when they subbed off McKenzie and brought Mo'unga on. More control and much more structured play. Now, Geordie Barrett is probably the first name in the 12 jersey on the team sheet. Having moved from fullback to 12 a couple seasons back, he's really been showing his worth in that 12 jersey. Some brilliant ball carrying ability as well as his kicking game also. Harvey and Anton Leonard-Brown as well as Ioane make up the other 3 slots. Ioane probably being the favourite for the number 13 jersey. His explosive runs and ability to beat defenders definitely secures him that spot. Moving on to the back 3, Caleb Clarke, Narawa of the Chiefs, Mark Talea of the Blues, Will Jordan of the Crusaders, and Lester Fa'aiga-Nuku. I've practiced a couple of times to pronounce that one. Gets the shout. Fa'aiga-Nuku got his last test match against Australia, and it wasn't potentially the best debut he could have made, but he definitely showed what he can do for the All Blacks with a couple amazing ball carrying runs around the breakdown, sniping around using his physicality. Mark Talea, one of the best players for the Blues this season, definitely deserves his shot. Probably will start with the maybe not surprised, but inclusion of Narawa from the Chiefs. Had a very good game against Argentina, crossing the whitewash to score away in Argentina. And Caleb Clarke, there's been a couple doubts about Caleb Clarke. Maybe he's just in the All Blacks team as a continuity as opposed to on form, but he can definitely turn up on his day. And if you go back a few years, he has definitely been on form. In terms of the fullback, you might even take the starting fullback from the fly halves. Maybe a pick of Beauden Barrett is probably the most likely shout, with McKenzie's ability to play there also. You could also start Will Jordan there if you needed to, but probably his best position is on the wing, although many New Zealand pundits have actually mentioned his ability to play fullback maybe being an option for the All Blacks. So that is the All Blacks team. They've only got one more team of the major 3 to review the team of South Africa, and that's coming up next. But if you do have any ideas about this team, any selection changes you'd make, or maybe just some information on some of the players, like number 12 Vahi, and I'll probably pronounce that wrong, so just inform me about what player he is, maybe his form, and what other players am I a little bit unsure of. I've not seen too much of Cameron Roydegaard, and Havili, has he been on form? I'm not sure for the Crusaders, and maybe even Jacobson as well. It'd be nice to know what the All Blacks fans have to say about these players, and do they deserve their shots at the World Cup. So yeah, onto the Springboks. The last of the 3 major teams to announce their Rugby World Cup squad in preparation of France is the Springboks. Now, the Springboks have been struck with some major injury concerns, with Pollard and Lekanyuam being left out of the squad. Pollard is one of the key players for South Africa, kicking them around the park, kicking the 3 points, and just really controlling the game. So that's a massive blow for the Springboks. Lekanyuam, one of the Springboks' star talents, his ability to light up the pitch with his footwork, offloading ability, but also his ability to shut opposition down in defence, is a massive blow for the Springboks. Diaga, maybe not quite as influential as the first 2, but definitely will be sorely missed in that second row for his sheer size and physicality, as well as his line-out presence also. Now, I'm just going to run through the team and give a couple thoughts on each player. A couple of these players that I'm not too sure on. It'd be great if you could leave some comments in the comment section below to let me know what you think of these players and fill me in on a couple gaps. I haven't watched a lot of these players' club seasons also, so do let me know if they're in form or if they've been selected based upon previous games. Kitshoff, Koch, Malherbe, Niche, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the fifth prop that Rassie Erasmus has taken. Now Kitshoff and Malherbe are the two standout starting props, with Koch and Niche usually coming on into the second half. The Springboks are famous for their bomb squad of rotating the props and the hookers at around the 50-minute mark and bringing a massive surge of scrummaging power on. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works in the World Cup in France. Koch coming off the bench with Niche usually does add a massive level of impact and can really be dominant in the scrum time. Now moving on into the hookers, we have Umbiombi and Malcolm Marx. Now it's always a big debate, with Malcolm Marx usually being the favoured choice to start amongst fans, but Rassie Erasmus and the South African coaching team usually like to start Umbiombi and then bring Malcolm Marx off the bench. Now look, in my opinion, you have to start the best players, but the coaches know better than I do. Sometimes it may be better to bring on your best player later on in the game because he might have more of an impact on tired legs and Malcolm Marx's ability to get over the ball. Now, in the second rows, we have Etzebeth, Klein, Ori and Snyman, with the ability with Franco Mostert to move into that second row. Now, these second rows are huge specimens of males, players, brilliant physicality around the park, and it'll be great to see how they come up against some of the big French second rows if they get that far in the tournament, and just how they can physically dominate teams. Now, Etzebeth is the key and standout name amongst the second rows, with Snyman also being a relatively new inclusion into the squad from the Munster in Ireland, that the province has moved over to South Africa playing the international games. Now moving on into the back row, we have Pieter-Steph du Toit, Khaleesi, Kwagga Smith, Van Staden, Vermeulen, Wiese, Fourie and Mostert. I mentioned Mostert can play into the second row, so that offers a bit of versatility there. Du Toit and Khaleesi being the two standout names in the back row, both starting in the World Cup win last time out in Japan. Kwagga Smith offers something brilliant off the bench, very fast, explosive player, a little bit smaller than the rest of the pack, so it can be a little bit more dynamic. Wiese having a stellar season for Leicester Tigers, really showing his worth and his ball carrying ability. Has a couple poor games under his belt for the Springboks, but of recent time has brought his club form onto the international stage. Now moving into the backs, I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly, but I believe we have 4 scrum halves in Faf de Klerk, Hendrikse, Ryanak and Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong, if Williams plays somewhere else, but I do believe this is actually 4 scrum halves, which is almost unheard of with both England and many other teams really favouring the 3 scrum halves or even the 2 scrum halves, which England used in the 2019 World Cup. Now, Faf de Klerk is probably the standout name there, offering some very unique traits of a scrum half, his incredible speed around the breakdown, but also what is unusual in the scrum half jersey is that physicality in the contact area, which he does bring. Now, Ryanak, I believe, is the second choice scrum half, even though Hendrikse is playing some amazing rugby. Ryanak's ability to snipe and is very fast with the ball. His distribution is very clean, so I believe Ryanak is the second choice there. Now moving into the 10 jersey, we have Libbok and Willemse. Now Willemse is a player that can play all across the back line, anywhere from fullback to 10, even potentially centres. A very versatile player, but Libbok, I believe, is going to be the starter. He's had a decent amount of game time of late in the Rugby Championship and against Argentina in the additional fixture. His goal kicking did fall off in the last fixture, last time out against Argentina, so he'll be looking to improve that and offer what some of Handré Pollard could have. Willemse, once again, amazing player and has the versatility to his game, does struggle off the boot and the kicking tee, so that will be a loss, which Pollard ultimately could have had. Moving into the centres, Diolande, Esterhuizen, Kriel. Now, these 3 are some amazing centres. Creel potentially not in as good a form as De Allende and Esterhuizen, but the Harlequins man Esterhuizen has been playing some incredible rugby at club level and has started to translate that onto the international stage. Brilliant repetitive ball carries on first phase, generating the momentum and the front forward motion that can really kickstart the team's attack. Creel is one of those players in which it has very fast feet and the ability to make a line break, will also partner well with either of the two inside centres. Moving on to the deadly Springboks back three, we have Arendse, Colby, Leroux, Mapimpi and Moody. You could almost group Moody, Colby and Arendse into a hat, swirl it around and pick one out, and they'll all play roughly the same mould. So Springboks have got a very special pool of short, fast feet, brilliant evasive runners in the winger jerseys. Leroux at fullback is one of the key cogs in the Springbok team. As I say, Willemse can also play fullback, and it'll be very, very interesting to see who gets selected over Leroux and Willemse, to see which player starts in the fullback jersey. But both have brilliant games. Willemse maybe a little bit more evasive, and Leroux a little bit more controlled and kicking based game. With the star man Mapimpi also featuring in the World Cup squad, definitely couldn't miss him out. He's a brilliant winger, brilliant under the high ball, and is very powerful in their sort of the same kind of way Korobetti is. Mapimpi is also the very explosive ball carrier, and yeah. So that is the Springboks team, and that is all three teams I'm going to be reviewing in today's video. Please let me know about some of the players in which I'm a little bit unsure on, and just let me know about the whole squad in general. There's been some interesting exclusions in the England squad, especially with Henry Slade, and in this squad Springboks have been struck with injury issues also. So please do let me know what you think of the three squads in the comment section below. I'll be replying to you all, and yeah, thank you very much for watching.